in the silence, no fear in here. Baseline thumping, hearts draw near. Faith the beats, yeah, we're riding the wave. Truth in the rhythm like a stone from the grave. From the wood to the mic, we're paving the way. Two brothers talking, yeah, we're walking the walk. Faith on the beat, real talk, no chalk. Bounce to the truth, let the speakers unlock. Two voices, one mission to spark. Light in the dark like a flame in the park. Two brothers talking, let the journey embark.
All right. And can you test real quick?
Test 1, test 2.
We're good. We're good. All right. So, good morning.
Good morning.
I know we're running a couple minutes late. We had some technical difficulties, but 2 or 3 minutes for anybody who's willing and able. We appreciate you for waiting. We are 2 brothers talking.
We are 2 brothers.
When we typically do talk.
Yeah.
We've talked before. We're gonna finish this episode. Probably talk some after. So,
yeah.
So excited to see y'all this morning, and for anybody who tunes in and watches, we hope that this is a blessing to you and continues to be a blessing to you. We hope that we're used as a blessing for you,
yeah.
And that's the intent. So we'll jump right on in. Today we have we're actually starting a series. We've only done one other series, so that one I think was 5 or 4 episodes.
Okay.
This one will be 5. Might be a bonus 6th in there, depending on how we go and what the engagement looks like.
Okay.
So this episode and the series is really centered around the power of the family unit, and what that means, and dicing that up. That's the whole family unit conversation is a big conversation.
Yeah, it is.
It's a really big conversation, which is why we didn't want to try to cram it into a long single episode. Instead, what we'll probably do is have several shorter, more concise episodes to really just dig into each individual topic and give each topic its fair share of attention. And anybody who gets engaged or who has any questions in the chat, like we'll tackle those. And if you have questions when you're reviewing it recorded, we'll tackle those too as a follow up. So just like we normally do. So power of the family unit. So a couple of reasons why this particular topic, Mark and I tend to take turns, and we come up with these things that God puts on our heart or that we experience in life, which is usually a way of God putting it on our heart.
Right.
And we these topics, we have no shortage of topics. I think I might have said this the first time we did a podcast last year. We can say that last year.
It's been a whole year.
Yeah. No, 2025, 2026. We started.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah. So when we started, I think I shared this once, but we had 70 topics.
Yeah, long. It was like, long list.
And that list took us minutes to come up with. Like, it didn't take us much time because there's so many things that we either have experienced or have engaged with others who have experienced, have heard from others asking to talk about it. And I think that this particular topic is it's kind of a spine of multiple topics that we've had people either ask us about individually or that we've talked about together. Another reason why this really feels timely is if you just look at the news every day and the disarray in the world, you might attribute a lot of that to politics and to a lack of money and people being generally selfish or demonstrating bad behavior. But if you look behind that, like, how did they start? Where did they learn those behaviors? Where did that show up, or why did they demonstrate those behaviors? A lot of it's about how they grew up, and a lot of it's about the family unit. And all of us have. There's probably not a person in this world that doesn't have trauma in the family unit in some way. So
define the word trauma.
So something that an experience that has negatively affected your view and perception of life.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. So that could be a scar. It could be an understanding that you gained. It's a wrong understanding. It could be lots of things, but that's the way I would describe it.
Okay. I agree with that.
Yeah. Yeah. So with that, like, I pulled some stats that I thought were interesting, and I think you had a chance to look at them, but I just want to kind of walk through. In this episode, we're framing really the problem that we're talking about. Like, the power of the family unit would, as a title, would indicate that we are giving away some power, and that's the problem.
Right.
We're not leveraging the power of the family unit today as the way we should, and particularly, frankly, in the minority community, the Black, Latino, Asian communities. Like, in some of those communities, we're not leveraging it at all. And to be clear, just because we're around each other doesn't mean we're leveraging the power of the family.
Right.
So
Which speaks to the trauma and dysfunction and so on.
correct. We can all live in the same house and still be a poorly functional or dysfunctional family unit.
Right.
So how does that show up, today? Like just a couple of real simple stats. So I ain't making none of these up. This is from a U.S. census. So today, this is from the U.S. Census Bureau to be specific. Today, a few things. One, the share of adults living with a spouse and children has dropped from 67% in 1970 to just 37% today. So I'll say that again. The share of adults living with a spouse and children has dropped from 67% in 1970 to 37% just today. So that's 2 generations of people. Within 2 generations of people, it's almost dropped in half.
Yeah.
Hold on. Go ahead.
So living with an adult living with a spouse and children, as compared to a spouse and children,
as compared to, well, there might not be a spouse if they're without the other adult. But so you're talking. Yeah. Separated.
Could it be but does it also, in comparison to a single family, just a person? I'm just single. I'm by myself.
Yeah, like
chosen not to get married.
The way I mostly grew up, which was with my mom and me, that would fit what it's trying to articulate.
Right.
Yeah, that is more people doing that.
Or even choosing. It could be a person that's choosing. I don't have any kids, but I just choose to be single.
Yeah, it could be that.
Okay.
It could be that too. But to be clear though, so the share of adults living with a spouse and children has dropped from 67% in 1970 to just 37% today. Well, that's not just about the child. That's about
family.
Yeah, the individuals. More individuals today are choosing not to be committed to someone.
Right. I got you. Whether you're talking about a spouse or having kids.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
That's good.
So another way to say it, more direct, would be a lot more people are more self-centered and selfish today and focused on self than they used to be.
Yeah, you can say it without judgment. It's just people have chosen, I'm gonna focus on me. Mm-hmm. I don't want to worry about a kid, and I don't want a spouse right now.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Like I never thought I would know as many people as I do who are disinterested in kids.
Yeah. And
it's not wrong.
Right.
To be disinterested in kids, to your point, like there's no judgment. And I don't even think about any judgment when I hear that.
Right.
I just find it interesting that if you were to look back 2 generations ago, the numbers, now my opinion, the numbers would say that more people were interested in creating a family unit than they are today.
I would even say, and people who are focusing on a child and being married, it is becoming a negative for many people, where it's like, hey, I want to stay home and raise my kids. That's that's very negative for a lot of people. So it's like there is a total shift as the statistic is stating. It's been a shift, a major shift.
It's been a big shift, and there is more judgment the other way, to your point, than it is toward people who want families. But like, just to keep the stats going, so another stat that was interesting is there are, in the U.S. alone, these are all U.S. stats. These are not global stats. So I just focused on the U.S. So 84.2 million families are in the U.S. today, but the structures of those families are materially different than just 20 years ago. So if you think about like, what does that mean? There are many more children living with one adult than there are actually more children living with one parent than there ever have been in the history of humanity. Like, or at least in the U.S., that's never, since they've been capturing data, which is at least 150 years. There's never been as many children in a single household as there are today. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't be in a single household and raise a child to be fine. Like, what it does mean though is it's hard to say that that a child not having both parents, functional parenting, like having them functionally present, not just having them there drunk, having them functionally present, isn't better than having one. Like I can't even imagine what the argument would be that would be the case. Right. But today, That's just the facts are there are more kids living in that situation than there ever have been in history.
Yep.
So then how that shows up in the world to me, and I'm interested to hear what you think too,
Okay.
on how it shows up in the world. If you think about like the lack of that family unit, you can look at a variety of statistics. I won't even go down the numbers, but I'll just talk about the themes. You can look at jail and all of the incarceration statistics, particularly in minority communities, but I would say it's true anywhere, as far as the family unit's impact and some trends of what people experience in family unit, and then how and versus those that are incarcerated. I think you can also look at people who have what I would call incapacitating trauma, like trauma that has substantially burdened their lives, like where they struggle to make decisions, where they have a lot of pain and hurt. A lot of that pain and hurt is from the family unit. It's not from I didn't have no money. Like yeah, that could be traumatic, but a lot of that trauma comes from childhood trauma comes from a dysfunctional family unit or a non-present family unit.
How do you, for somebody watching and it's like, well, those things are true. Those are problems in our society, but I don't connect that to not having a family unit. So how do we make that connection?
So
what's missing?
So now just to be super clear, like now I'll get into my opinion of that answer versus like any stats.
Gotcha.
So my opinion of that answer based on what I've seen and just my life, I think there's a couple ways you can connect it. One, if you look at, I'll talk about boys first.
Okay.
So a young man, a boy, can be raised by his mother, and that can be very effective. But effective doesn't mean optimal.
Okay.
There still could be things missing. And in that scenario, I'll just use myself as the example because that's the easiest way to do it without like casting any judgment, because I have none on this topic at all. So other than for 4 years or so, I grew up basically without a dad. So and those 4 years were not like early or late. So I wouldn't call them formative years.
Okay.
So like, my stepdad, who I'm still close to today, was around, but he was my mom's last husband. And I kind of, other than that, just had her, the other years of childhood, other 12 or 14 years. In those 14 years, I lacked discipline. Like I lacked pure, straight up discipline. And my mom tried to discipline me the best she knew how.
Right.
But her discipline wasn't a father's discipline. It just wasn't. And that looked, like more like tangibly, that looked like I was less afraid and I had less reverence for her than I had for my dad during those few years. Right. And so like I would test boundaries more with her than I did with my dad. And I admit he and I talk about that. Like,
right.
It was very clear that like she's so much so that she had to pull him back into my life without them being together when I was 17 and 18, because I was out there doing stuff that most people don't even know I was doing.
Right.
And I shouldn't have been doing. And he had to come back in, and we didn't even have much of a connection at the time because they were divorced and long separated, and he was remarried and moved on. And like he came back in, and just his presence while we worked on our love for each other, rebuilding that, his presence changed how I operated.
What about his presence? Why could you not respect the discipline coming from your mom as much as you respect it coming from your dad? What's the difference?
So, I mean, I think there's a part of that answer that we'll never understand. I think there's a God-gifted talent that men throw away that we have to influence our children.
Right.
Because I think the influence is the same for daughters too. My influence on my daughter is materially different than the influence my wife has on my daughter.
Right.
The confidence I give her, the directive I give her. She warmed my heart about 2 weeks ago and told me that the bar for her future husband was me.
Yeah.
Like that warmed my heart that I had that influence, right? Like that's something that mom can't do.
Right.
Mom can do a lot of other things that I can do, but like that's something that was mine.
Right.
So like boys and girls, I think there's a part that we just can't understand that God has gifted us to do that we just trash half the time.
Yeah.
And don't really appreciate. the part that I can recognize was my respect for him was I used fear and reverence on purpose. Like there was a fear that I had of repercussion from him that I just didn't have from my mom.
Right.
And she was like a force. Like she was small but mighty. And she taught in some of the toughest places in Dallas over the 30 some odd years that she taught. And she's taking guns and everything else out of classrooms. And I'm talking elementary school.
Right.
So like these places were not for the faint of heart.
Yeah.
And that woman was raising me. So like I didn't grow up soft, and she wasn't soft with me.
Right.
But there was just something that she couldn't create in me that my dad could create in me, a feeling. And I would attribute it to, well, I'm going to use another word because fear sounds bad. I would attribute it to, that's why I use the word reverence, because that's the only other word I can think of, but healthy fear.
Right.
There was a healthy fear of consequence.
Right.
Like if you think fear is wrong, well, so you don't want your child to be afraid to touch the stove?
Right.
Like, yeah, you do. Like, you don't want them to be afraid to stand on the ledge of a cliff? Of course you do. Right. You do want them to be afraid of things like that are going to hurt them. Right. And that's the fear I had. I had the fear of like, I'm going to do something that's going to disappoint him. I'm going to do something that's going to create a repercussion for me later. And even when I got those repercussions, because I got the beatings of a lifetime. So when I would get those beatings, and my mom with me too, but it just wasn't the same. Right. When I got those beatings, the emotional part of that beating was worse for them. Like I had disappointed the only male figure who was around. Right. So that's the best way I can explain it.
Talking about this, you really have to be open to the fact that men and women are different and we bring different things to the table. If you can't see that, then it's hard to have this conversation because then when we talk about the lack of presence of a father or this dynamic of family where like there's this divorce or whatever these different things that the trauma that we experience as kids, it doesn't mean as much because you're just like, well, the other person just can bring more to the table. And it's like, we have to acknowledge that as human beings, we are different and we all bring different things to the table. And even though we can't put our hands on it, there's something that a father, a male role model and a female role model, they bring different things to the table. And the minute you remove one of those things, those pieces from the table, it affects everything else. And it's not like I get it like as men, we can take that and we can kind of abuse that. But the reality is there's a difference, and women can do great things. It's not to take from the other person. My wife can parent my son in ways that I can't. And I think the temptation is like, what I bring to the table is more valuable or is good enough. And it's like, it's not, it is good and it is of value, but this is also equally of value for that child to receive or that family unit. They need that. Right. And so it's hard to have the conversation without acknowledging that.
I kind of look at it like the analogy I think about parenting often is water and fertilizer. So if you are raising, let's consider your child or consider the children that we have around us a garden. You want them to grow. You want them to be fruitful. Right? You want them to expand. You want them to break through ground. You want them to just multiply in their own way. And water will make that happen. That doesn't mean water is not valuable just because fertilizer will make it happen faster. Right. With water. Like both, and you notice I didn't use a gender on either. Right. It doesn't matter which one. You can call yourself fertilizer, call yourself the water. Whatever. One of them smells like crap. So let's just say the man will be the fertilizer. Right. The man will smell like crap. Okay, fine. So, but you need both. Yeah. But I do think, to your point, oftentimes I do hear this talk track in our culture today, right, of like, well, I don't need no man because I can do, or I don't need no woman because I can do. And it's like, well, it's not about whether you need them or not, or saying that what you do is wrong or not enough. It's really that if you can have both, if you can have water and fertilizer and your responsibility is the garden, why wouldn't you have both? Like only pride would keep you from having both. Right. Right. If you had it to select, you're right. If it's present, only pride would keep you from having both. Yeah. I think that's the that's the tough part that we're facing today, because if you going back, taking that point, tying into the, today there's the share of adults living with a spouse and children has dropped from 67% in 1970 to 37% today. Like, tying into that, it's like, well, if I already have made it up in my mind that I don't need or want a spouse, then I will potentially just neglect what my child needs alongside that. So meaning that, like, if I have a spouse, and again, I'm being gender neutral on purpose. It doesn't matter which gender we're talking about.
Right.
If I have a spouse and a child with that spouse, and then we are no longer a spouse, right? We get divorced, we separate. And let's say that happens for all the right reasons.
Right.
Something's going on, it's irrecoverable, you gotta do that. And it's better for you both. Okay, fine. But trust, it is not better for your child, unless that person is the extreme, which is abusive and has some problems that need to be medically treated and all those things.
Right.
That's real too. People do deal with that. So I don't want to minimize it. But unless you're in that situation, which most are not, then you do have to get the water and the fertilizer, the maximum value to your garden. You do have to proactively make sure that child gets the goodness from that spouse, from that former spouse. Like, if you don't proactively do it, just because you're not keeping them away, doesn't mean that you're maximizing the garden. Like, you got to proactively keep the channel open so that child doesn't lose out on what they can gain, even though that spouse is not for you.
Right.
And I think that's really hard.
You have to supplement. So that's when you see mentors, you see, or like it goes both ways.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing you said a second ago that sparked the thought is, if I tell myself I don't need a woman, I don't need a man, I'm definitely going to instill that into my child, that you don't need a woman, you don't need a man.
Mm-hmm.
And so the family unit is a culture, it's an environment, and we're nurturing or destroying our kids in that environment. And so if we tend to pass these things on. My problems tend to become my children's problems.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the problem. Adam blew it in the garden, and he blew it for the generations to come. And so we have to, it's just, man, we can argue that we don't need this and our kids don't need that, but the statistics show otherwise. Now, if you can show me where things have gotten better since we started to dismantle the family, show it to me.
Yeah,
but you're not going to be able to. I don't know anything in our society that speaks to the fact that we've gotten better as we remove the family unit.
Right.
I don't see it.
Well, the other place, just to keep framing the problem, so we can kind of use what we're saying now for the next episodes.
Right.
The other place you see this too is, let's talk about like mental health. So I firmly believe that there was undiagnosed mental health prior to, call it 1970, 1980. Like, mental health statistics are crazy right now. And you would think if you looked at them on paper, you'd be like, oh, people have gone crazy.
Right.
People haven't gone crazy. People were always crazy. And it just wasn't diagnosed before. But it has gotten worse.
Yeah.
Like, when they started tracking it to now, it still has inclined materially. So if we just forget what happened before that. So let's just take 1980 to now, which is kind of when I saw they were actually tracking some really good statistics. They were doing it before, but like when they set the bar of the units of measure, like how they were going to track it, it happened around 1980.
Right.
And then to now, those stats just look like a mountain.
Yeah.
So, and I think you can attribute a lot of that to the family unit, not the whole thing, but the trauma we mentioned is the most direct contributor. But then also the lack of foundation. Like, when you feel like you have one person to lean on,
right,
and that person is down and out,
right.
So I'll only use my own example, because I don't think I can speak to anybody else's. But like like in my late teenage years, my mother got really ill. She had to retire, and it was time anyway for her to retire, but she retired medically, so she was in like a real bad space. She couldn't take care of herself. Mm-hmm. So even when I moved out, I was still taking care of her, right, to the degree that I could. And that was financial, that was being present, that was coming over every day, that was taking her shopping, paying her bills, do whatever I had to do. And when I lost her, she was like I said, small but mighty. Like she was my rock from a person perspective. Like, I believed in God, and I had found God before that, but I was also young, and I leaned to what I could touch and see,
Right.
and she was what I could touch and see, and so I leaned her, and I, as far as I'm concerned, even today, like that wasn't my guardian angel. She was my angel. So so like I'm looking at her, and I can't lean on her anymore. And as far as I was concerned, I had no one else to lean on.
Right.
And that struggle, like I was working 2 jobs, I was taking care of her. That struggle, I had to drop out of college, and I was paying for myself to go to college. Like, so I had to throw away some money and all these little things. Because looking back, those things were little. I mean, at the time, it seemed big, but looking back, those things were not as big as I made them to be. But all of them piled up, right? And I had nobody to go to, right? And it fortunately, she had already helped me to build a great relationship with God. So eventually I was able to unburden myself with him. Right. But man, like you're talking about probably 3-4 years where I just, man, I didn't know what to do. Like I never considered suicide or anything like self-hurt. Right. But I definitely, like I never seriously considered that, but I definitely gained understanding for why people would consider that. Yeah. I don't agree with it. All of it. I'll say all the things everybody thinks, but like I gained an understanding. But all my judgment went away if I had it then, right? Because I thought like this was enough to break. Without God, this would have broken me, right? So if you don't have God, in particular, like I understand, right? It's just this will break you, right? And if you have a family unit, and that could be extended. It doesn't even have to necessarily be a family unit we think about only as a mother, father, and a child. A family unit is aunts and grandmothers and cousins and uncles and like just present, just being engaged and present. And I just didn't have any of that. Yeah. And like I think if you look at the mental health struggles people have today, they don't have anyone that they can trust, that they have built trust with over the years to work through problems with and seek out counsel, right? And they don't trust today. A lot of people don't trust the church to do that. So to really be vulnerable, like they just don't. Right? And I'm not gonna say they don't have reason to either. So like, well, however we got there, but it's just the truth. Yeah. So then what do people do? Right? They seek out mental health vows through other means that are not usually good. Yeah. And all of that stems from the family unit just being broken. I'll ask you a real simple question. When's the last family reunion you were at?
Last family reunion.
Well, you gotta think that hard. That kind of says it right there. Like I went to one with that I was invited to from my biological family. Okay. And this was I think it was 2024, into 2024. And I had been to one since I was a kid, right? Which was my stepdad's family, who we're still close with now, but like and they stopped doing it a long time ago.
They stopped doing
like
family
decades ago, yeah, at least 2 decades ago. And but the fact that like my biological family was still doing it I found it odd. It was great, right? But it was odd, and people there were close, and there was probably 100 some odd people there. Like, yeah, but I think they're the minority.
No, I would agree with that because I can't think of the last time we've had a family reunion. And if we have a family reunion, I probably wouldn't go.
Why is that?
Only because I think a part of me, well, I'm an introvert, first off, but secondly, it's like, you get wired from the society. Like, I don't need, it kind of speaks to what we're talking about. It's like, I don't need to connect with these people. I haven't seen these people in years. You kind of you've gone on with your life, and it's like internally, you almost don't see the value in it anymore. And it's like, but anytime I've gone to a family reunion, and you see that the programs, you hear the dominoes slamming, the cars, the laughter, you're like, man, this is even the crazy uncle. It's still you feel like this is fullness that you feel. You do, and it's like. We don't know what could be alcohol, to be clear. It could be alcohol. we don't. I think we don't recognize that we need a family. I don't know. We need, and we might even need to define what a family is, and maybe we can do that as we start to look at that, solve the problem or whatever, or from our perspective.
Yep.
But yeah, that family reunion, that's good times. That's full times.
Mm-hmm. But so let's tie that back to what we talked about in the start. If the share of adults living with a spouse and children has dropped from 67% in 1970 to 37% today, do you think that wouldn't indicate that people don't want to be around other people?
Yeah, I think so.
So why would you have a family reunion? Of course, family units would break apart. Of course, aunts and uncles and sisters and brothers and cousins would be at odds easy. They'd let trivial things destroy them. Right. Because just because y'all grew up together, or this trivial thing, of course, just throw all that away. Like it's easy to do today because the share of adults living with a spouse and children has dropped from 67% to 37%. Right. In 40 years. Yeah. Or 50 years. Like, that's not a long time. Yeah. Because if you think about it, before that, it was in the 80%. Like, it was very common. Right. And it wasn't because everybody got along perfectly. Right. It was because everyone valued family differently. They value connection differently.
And we don't value it anymore. We don't value it. We don't value the connection. Because when I think about family, I think connection, whether it's biological connection, whether it's commitment, whether it's legal connection. Like, there's a connection and there's culture. And I think we don't, as a society, we don't value connection as much anymore. And I think that's also part of the problem. Right. Like, this long-standing, deep connections, we don't establish those. I don't even like to talk on the phone anymore. Like, I'm a text. Like, it's just like we've distanced ourselves from other people, and we don't understand like how that's impacted us.
So my genuine belief, and I think this ties into the other place you see this show up, like with young people who have mastered what you just said, like where they are text and instant chat, face talk machines. Right. You know what I'm saying? So like, they're not gonna get on the phone and talk to anybody. Right. And I think that shows up. I think it's where it shows up. But I think what's behind that is we don't feel any accountability or responsibility for fellow men. Like I really do think that's got a lot to do with it. Right. If I don't feel that I owe you connection because you're breathing and you're here and God put you in front of me, if I don't feel that I owe you that, then today there's no neutral. So then that means, since there's not no neutral, then I feel like I need to make sure I keep it from you. I need to make sure I don't burden myself and I don't give you something you might not give back, right? And all of that. Like, I'm gonna go through all those thoughts instead of just, I'm accountable to connect and attempt to connect. And you do have to use some discernment and some emotional intelligence so that you can't connect with everybody the same. Right. So you got to use a little judgment there. But what if, like, that to me shows up a lot in kids, because we've imparted all those, like you said earlier, we've imparted those belief systems implicitly or explicitly to our kids. Yep. So then they don't connect. Like, I think I look at our youngest, and I think people of his age think he's weird because the dude talks. Right. Like, because he'll sit and look at you and ask, how are you doing? Yep. How are you feeling? Right. And I think that's weird at his generation. Right. And I think now today, unfortunately, it's weird in ours. Yeah. Like not a text, a call. How are you doing? Yeah. And we end up just giving these kind of superficial answers. Man, I'm good. Everything's great. No probe. Yeah. It's like, cool. Because I don't really want that. I got away with that. I don't want your problems. Let's keep it moving. Right. And I did the check mark. I checked on you. You good? Okay, we're good. But you see the signs that a person is not good. Not good. You see the signs in society that says our society is not good. Now there's many reasons for that, but part of that is this concept that's been established as family. We said we don't need this anymore. Mm-hmm. We're gonna keep it moving without this. And step by step, little by little, we've broken it down to where it doesn't. Man, if you see strong families, that's a anomaly in our society today. Right. Yeah. Right. The last place I think it shows up too is like you can, and a lot of this ties to what we just talked about, but it's, to be specific, it's the economic part. Okay. So if family units are strongest, and you can see this in some cultures, family units are really strong, and when they're really strong and they're performing optimally, doesn't mean everybody's getting along perfectly, but when they're performing really well and people are close, there's an economic benefit too. Families pool money, families help each other be aware of opportunities, right? Families hire each other, right? And that might, like today, it's a real negative thing to hire family members, right? Like even if you own the business and you don't have some rule against it, you work for a big company and there's a nepotism rule, okay, you can't do it. But like if you own the business or you need something done, so and so does great tree work and he's got a business doing lawn and tree landscaping, and you go hire anybody else, why? Yep. So like, and the answer might be because you don't want to give your family money, right? You don't want your family to come up. Yeah. Or, if you come over there, you're going to have to talk. Like, whatever those answers are, it could be a combination of them. Yeah. But we don't do that. We don't do that. And I think that's that's a very obvious, common way economically where it shows up too. So there's a education impact. There's from a learning and the child learning perspective, there's a mental health impact. Right. There's an economic impact. And then there's this connection impact. Right. And kind of a avoidance of connection, or maybe even it results in isolation a bit. And isolation being choice. Right. Right. Like a pure chosen fragmentation of your whole life. So I think that's really interesting that would turn out that way. I know this episode is a little shorter, but I would love to talk about maybe the next one of the upcoming episodes that what has created this problem. Mm-hmm. Like how did the family break down? Like what things were introduced that caused for us to start to see, hey, we don't really need family anymore. I would love to have a conversation about that. The different things that have impacted that lack of need for families in our mentality. Yeah, I definitely got some thoughts on that. Yeah. So to your point about us, wrapping it up, like we're all wrapping up now. We've been just a little bit over 30 minutes. So I think we framed up the problem. We kind of walked through some stats. Well, our next episode will be kind of episode 2 of this series, and we'll dig into some specific topics in the following 4 episodes. It related to like the power of the family unit. We talked about a lot here about how it shows up and some of the feelings and thoughts that are behind it today, right? And how we experience it, like how we see it in our culture. But then we also, y'all know, like we're gonna talk about solutions too. Yeah. So we're not gonna just talk about problems, but it is important. It was important rather for us to take the time to really dissect the initial problem. Yep. And hopefully this gave you a lot of food for thought. What we'll do is we'll get our next episode on the calendar, and then we'll push that out, and we'll keep these to about 30. So these will be a little shorter than the 45 or 50 that we usually do, and some of that's from feedback too. So thank y'all for some feedback along the way. We want to make these better and better and better, and you're the audience. Like we want you to give us feedback so we can make them better for you. Correct. So hope this blesses y'all. Y'all have a good Saturday, and we'll catch you on the flip side.